partisan support, is the reverse Nixon. Remember Nixon in 72 went to China, opened up relations with China in order to split them off from Russia, in order that we could pit China against Russia. Because from the United States looked at it strategically, you never want Russia and China in any kind of partnership or alliance, because then the United States cannot match that. That's exactly what Joe Biden ended up creating, an alliance between Russia and China that, while, yeah, Russia and Chinese have had problems in the past, but not now. The relationship between Putin and Xi is genuine, it's real, and they are not just swapping bottles of vodka for tea or whatever when they get together. They're actually reaching deals, and they're doing tangible economic projects, and their number of Chinese cars sold in Russia has soared, displaced what used to be sold by U.S. and European car manufacturers. Again, the United States if I'm the Chinese listening to the United States, you think you're talking to a crazy person. They're schizophrenic. 1 minute they're saying, oh man, we want to be friends with the Chinese, BFFs, we want to get along. And the next minute, hey, we're sanctioning you. You're an empire trying to take over. We're talking about going to war with them. So the Chinese are saying, you think these crazy people are going to go to war with us? We're going to get ready to go to war. The deepening relationships there, that's where Trump is trying to see if he can. They genuinely believe that, oh, Russia doesn't really like China. We'll cut them a better deal. No, that's not going to happen. I try to tell people that. They don't want to listen. The United States we've created a narrative in our mind, and it really dominates in the population. It's anti-Russian, number one, and it's anti-Chinese. They are both viewed as enemies. That is the general attitude. They're not viewed as friends and allies. They're not viewed as nations that we share things in common with. I am completely befuddled by the U.S. animus towards both Putin and the Russian people. It was one thing to have this, let's call it the anti-Soviet views, when the Soviet Union was still around. They were communists, they attacked religion. We saw them as being aggressive. Now, I think a lot of that was probably oversold as well by the West. But the birth of the new Russia, the Novorossiya that we have today, it's a nationalist nation, strongly nationalist, great pride in the history of heritage of Russia. But Russia is not seeking to conquer the world. It's not driven by this imperial quest. The West is. Why are we so obsessed with Russia? Russia's got all these resources and we want them. And we've seen that with Lindsey Graham and now Donald Trump with the rare earth minerals we want those too, out of Ukraine. Gimme. And at least Putin and the Russians recognize that they look at the United States like a rapist. They're saying this rapist wants to date us. I don't think so. I don't think we're going out, or we're not, at least not going out unchaperoned. If we go out, I'm going out with some guy that's got a gun. So if Mr. Rapist decides to attack me, we can shoot him. The story, and let's call it the legacy media, it doesn't matter anymore. They no longer have a monopoly on information. The internet is too wide open. Your program's an example of it. They can't stop it. They can, you can get shut down on YouTube, fine. You go to BitChute, you go to Rumble. There are other platforms you can go to. And ultimately, the word gets out, as opposed to this incredible spin that's being put out that Trump is catering to the dictator Putin. Whereas here's Zelensky actually locking up and killing opposition figures and allowing no opposition, shutting down opposition press. And yet he celebrated as, quote, a true Democrat. Trump's catering to a dictator and ignoring a democracy. Well, here's the reality. Russia it is Ukraine that is the authoritarian dictatorship. There are still opposition political parties in Russia, run and have people in the legislature, and they're not being locked up. The West always makes issues where someone like Navalny, who was a CIA asset and had been on the payroll, if you will, by the U.S. government for quite a long time, when the Russians go after him. Here is legitimately somebody who's involved with foreign actors trying to subvert Russia, that's proof of dictatorship. Again, when they get into those ad hominem attacks, it just tells you that you're actually dealing with that out over the weekend. I wrote an article Sunday about the relationship between USAID and CIA, and the fact that USAID, when Kennedy first set it up, it was used by the CIA for cover. So you'd send CIA officers overseas. You'd say, "Hey, I'm an aid worker. I'm here to help you dig wells and build outhouses and plant corn." But no, the CIA officers were using it, and then it was used as a tool for fomenting coups. And the fact that the USAID was paying so much money for media people in Ukraine to spread misinformation. So I put that article out. Within 24 hours, an American who lives and works in Kiev, who is basically appears as one of the guys being paid for by USAID, or was being paid for, launches a personal attack on me for being a liar and a rat ass, and just calling names. Again, the ad hominem attack. Let me know, man, my article was more true than I knew. Because when they come after you like that, it lets you know you're close to the truth. And the media itself doesn't want to focus on that. But when you've got literally billions of dollars being spent in Ukraine, and reportedly the number was bandied about 140 million a month for media support. Don't know if that's true or not. That's what was being reported. But I'll tell you, it's a substantial fee regardless of how much it was. And it was all designed to feed lies into the atmosphere so that people would be deceived about what was going on. Look, this isn't about, they say, oh, this is support for democracy. Ukraine's not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. Donald Trump got that right. They have jailed political opponents, shut down opposition media, shut down the church, the Eastern Orthodox Church. Look, when you lose Lindsey Graham, when the little lady from South Carolina who's been to Kiev at least 9 times, according to one video I saw the senator mention, and who's been an ardent supporter of Zelensky, when he comes out and says it's time for Zelensky to go, you know that the entire, it's gone from nighttime to daytime. It's been a complete reversal. They may have been planning at that point to figure out a way to try to stay involved with Ukraine, but I think Zelensky's behavior was so outrageous that it really pushed not just Donald Trump, it pushed the entire team over the edge. And this isn't about promoting democracy in Ukraine. This is about destroying Russia. This is about taking Russian resources and controlling them by the West. That's what this whole project has been about from the beginning. And that's one of the reasons for such great animus directed at Vladimir Putin, because he basically put a stop to it in July of 2000, called in the oligarchs and said, okay, basically this raping of Russia, it's coming to an end. You're either going to stay out of politics, invest your money in the country, or you can get out, or we'll put you in jail. It's a very stark choice. And as a result of that, today Russia its economy is strong, its people are well fed, well employed. The cities are amazing in terms of their beauty and cleanliness, because they weren't wasting money in foreign military adventures that were killing other people. What's fascinating is, so I've tuned into Sky News because they're usually a reliable indicator of where the British public are and the key government players. They're shocked that they are slack-jawed. Their jaws are hanging open. They can't believe what they've seen. They recognize now, as far as Trump is concerned with Ukraine, Ukraine is done. It's a finished deal. And if anything's going to happen going forward, it's going to be entirely on the shoulders of the United Kingdom and the French. And they don't have the economic strength. They don't have the military strength. And Starmer he's doing make-believe, dress up like a little 5-year-old kid pretending to be a firefighter or a soldier.
or a cowboy. It's all make-believe. Because and in terms of actually doing something, they've come to an end of the line. What's fascinating to me is the Brits. Well, we looked at this clip and start to stop. The Brits are running that 10-minute clip without pause. They're just running it, and they're showing it every hour. Every hour is breaking news. Top of the hour, bottom of the hour. Top of the hour, bottom of the hour. And right now, it's usually they go to their standard programming where they're reading the news of the next day. Not tonight, baby. They're recognizing that this means the United States is out of this, and this whole thing is going to be on the shoulders of us, the UK, and we're not sure we can handle it. They were hopeful, because I made a point of watching them before Zelensky showed up, and they were expressing hope that out of this, Zelensky had signed the agreement, that secure that America was going to be there to help protect Ukraine, and that would give the Brits sort of the comfort they needed. They were betting on that, and they lost. And Starmer knew it. He knew that he had made a terrible mistake by backing Harris and trying to send in his campaign workers. Trump's just going to let them stew. He's letting them dig their own. Again, with the Brits, he's been very pleasant about it. Oh, man, Starmer, if I had your accent, by God, I would have been president long ago, man. People would have loved me. He's got the butter out, and he's slathering it on for them. And they think that they're being charming with Trump and that, oh, yeah, we're telling Trump what a great guy he is. Trump didn't ask them for a single thing. Yeah. Trump didn't say, oh, guys, listen, I need some help here. Could you get this for it? No, they were the ones. They were the supplicant. And he's showing that when Putin says, we're not going to talk to there's no legitimacy with Zelensky. We're not going to talk to him. This actually reinforces Putin's position now going forward. And it gives actually Putin some more leverage in coming up with a negotiating strategy with the United States. Somebody got the methane gas next to the spark and kaboom. It showed that Zelensky either didn't listen to his handlers or his handlers are fools. So he shows up instead. He should have been there in a suit and tie. If he would have showed up in a suit and tie for the first time, that would have initially disarmed Donald Trump. But instead, he shows up with his ninja pajama outfit, okay? And he had everything but the fuzzy bunny slippers on. I made a prediction that, in the meeting with both Macron and Starmer, who had coordinated in advance, their goal was to get Trump on board to back them to go in and support Ukraine. They're going to get the United States involved. And I said there was so much smoke being blown up, both Macron and Starmer's nether regions, that I was surprised the fire department, DC Fire Department, was not called to the White House. Zelensky went in thinking I guess he thought he could bully Trump. I don't put Trump up on some pedestal as if he's a god, but he's a New York real estate guy, and he's used to trading punches, okay? And Zelensky has never been up against anybody like this. And then here's Zelensky starts blasting him, and Trump lets J.D. Vance do some of the punching. Because Zelensky at one point accuses J.D. Vance of yelling. J.D. Vance was very measured and polite and low-key, and Trump goes, he ain't yelling. You want to know what yelling is? This is yelling. I think actually Trump and Vance may have been part of a plan. They are laying out the predicate. They're laying out the case for why Zelensky has to go as leader of Ukraine, because they know that Putin's not going to negotiate with him. And so this today, it was Zelensky's last chance. Signed the deal, and when you look at that deal, you had a conversation with Alexander Mikouros. I haven't had a chance to watch that yet, but I know that he's commented on the fact that when he's read through the so-called deal, it's a hot mess. It doesn't commit anybody to anything, and it's not even enforceable. Now, I monitor the Brits because, again, this entire week, the visit of Macron, then the visit by Starmer, and then this today, this was all planned by the Europeans. This was their last Hail Mary pass to try to get the United States to stick with the Project Ukraine, to continue to get the United States to back them up. That if push comes to shove, they know that the United States is going to have their back. And Trump had great meetings, very pleasant, upbeat with Macron and with Starmer, but did not concede on the very thing they came, which was to get a commitment that he was going to help out in Ukraine if they get into trouble. But Zelensky could have played along. Instead, he did exactly what you shouldn't do with Donald Trump if you want to influence Donald Trump. And I would not be surprised that right now, Ratcliffe at the CIA has ordered the Directorate of Operations to send orders to the field. All CIA officers are to be returning to headquarters now. Now, the British press generally understood what had happened. They understood that Trump, hey, man, he was magnanimous towards the Brits. He says, we're not going to put you on that same European Union list of tariffs. We'll eliminate that. That's critical for the UK. They're export dependent on the United States. As far as the United States is concerned with the UK, they're really not an important part of our economic picture. But when it came to getting on board with Ukraine, he rebuffed them. Over the last 25 years, it was during that period, that Wild West period of the 1990s, when Western oligarchs were flooding into Russia and trying to get control of oil, gas, uranium, minerals, precious metals, gold. And then Putin put a stop to it starting in July of 2000. And it was after that the West began concentrating more on saying, okay, let's bring Ukraine into NATO. Let's continue to surround Russia with other NATO states, and we'll ultimately defeat them and carve them up. And Russia will be consigned to the dustbin of history. And Putin said, "Niet, not going to happen." But the fact of the matter was he was elected, and he was not acting illegally, and he was trying to bring, while the West was pumping money through USAID and other covert sources through both on the British and CIA side into groups and individuals in order to foment this uprising, which it succeeded. And then they tried to play the victim, but they were attacking and trying to exterminate the Russian speakers in Ukraine. Remember, Zelensky entered office promising to bring an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. And the West continues to insist that Ukraine was just minding its own business, and those nasty Russians intent on conquering the world decided to invade. That's a lie. You can explain why it's a lie to people, and they still refuse to believe it. But the fact was that the United States and the Brits were involved in helping fabricate a coup that overthrew a democratically elected government. And Zelensky is the biggest hypocrite of them all. He grew up speaking Russian. He's had to learn Ukraine, and he doesn't speak. He's not a great speaker of the Ukrainian language. But this is part of a broader Western objective to destroy Russia, to take control of Russia, get control of its resources. Zelensky didn't get into office because he was such a great guy and a visionary philosopher and politician. He was put there because he was one that could be manipulated, could be controlled, and the wealthy Ukrainian oligarchs that backed him, they had something else in mind. And if he crosses them, they will kill him. He keeps that in the forefront of his mind. But he's also, he really has lost touch with reality. And I know from friends who were involved with this process before that despite public claims that Trump doesn't read, Trump doesn't pay attention, what I was told by somebody who had been involved with briefings for both George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and then Donald Trump, said that of the three, Trump was the one who was always the most engaged, asked the most probing questions, and paid the most attention. If Tulsi's giving him good product, then Trump is paying attention to it. And it's like trying to turn a giant aircraft carrier with a small rudder. It's going to turn slowly, but I think the turning has started. And she, by virtue of overseeing the production of the Presidential Daily Brief, is, I think, taking a very active role to make sure that the very best intelligence is put in front of Donald Trump. Europe, I described Europe as a little dog, a chihuahua, with no teeth. They have an annoying bark. They crap all over the floor. But in terms of usefulness and being able to do anything, they're useless. We don't, the United States doesn't need them. This really, I think this is, let's say it's the war between the United States and the European Union. European Union is an artificial creation. You put Russia, France, and Germany combined, they're incapable of taking on Russia. All of Europe is incapable of taking on Russia. It's a pipe dream. Hungary and the Slovak Republic being two of the principal examples. The EU claims it is going to do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't even have an army. It doesn't have any military. But we're going to challenge Russia. Good luck with that. You saw Trump even make fun of Starmer he did it in a polite way, but they tried to Starmer wanted to get the United States to say, hey, you back us. We get into trouble, you come to our aid. And yeah, you don't need us. You're strong enough on your own. You can take on Russia, can't you? And Starmer was like, he didn't say no, but the answer is no. But they're hoping they're trying to figure out a way that they can trick Donald Trump into getting back in bed with them and go to war with Russia. Trump, I think, has decided, I'm not playing that game, I'm going in a different direction. So the West has created, I would argue, the West has created this, I'll call it the myth of communist subversion, the myth of a Russian subversion, that in order that we build up military resources, and we're the ones involved with going overseas and attacking other countries, not them. That's the story we tell. We create the story that, he's going to recreate the Russian Empire, the Soviet Empire, and imply that he's going to go around the world conquering countries. What was the purpose of this entire Western effort to bring Ukraine into NATO? This wasn't a 1-month plan or a 3-month plan. This has been planned for years. And the United States has been working for years to try to subvert Russia. That's what was fascinating, is the West has always hid behind the justification of going after the Russians because they're subverting our government. Whereas I would argue we've created, I'll call it the myth of Russian subversion, because the Russians have they didn't need to take over the United States. They've got the largest land mass of any country in the world. They didn't need to take over the United States because they needed our natural resources. They're the #1 country in terms of natural resources. They didn't need Lebensraum. They didn't need additional space for their population. Good God. They could easily accommodate the populations of Russia and India in the space, the land that Russia covers. But the West doesn't want to accept it. So we keep pushing it, and people keep believing it and keep dying as a consequence of it.
It was a failure for the Brits. Trump didn't sell out on his commitment to end Ukraine. So there's the bottom line. The British press, I put an article up at Sonar 21 where I quoted a variety of different outlets in Britain. And boy, they were giddy. Oh my God, we're not going to get tariffed. Oh, this is wonderful. We're really charmed the pants off of Trump. Now, I don't deny that Trump has a strong narcissistic element to his personality. But frankly, I'm not aware. I think the last president we had that wasn't driven by narcissism was probably Gerald R. Ford. And before Ford, it was Harry Truman. Otherwise, most everybody else that gets in the office, they thought they were something special. And Trump clearly thinks he's something special. And from the British perspective, tariffs on their exports would have been devastating, because I think the United States is their #1 export market. So in the scheme of things, the British economy is really dependent upon exports to the United States. That could be a killer. And they've already got problems. They grew in the latest quarter like 0.1%. Which means they're not growing. They're stagnating. That was a primary objective. But then the other objective was get Trump to back us in Ukraine. And he essentially said no, but he did it in a very polite way. Oh man, Starmer, if I had your accent, God, I would have been president long ago, man. People would have loved me because that accent, they'd think I'm really smart. He was saying things like that. What Trump did for the Brits in that meeting was say, okay, yeah, initially we're going to lump you in with all the Europeans and tax you, but we got a special relationship with you. You're our really good friend. It sounded a little bit like that used car salesman. hey, you're just not anybody. You're somebody special. And because you're special, I'm going to give you a deal. That was what Trump was doing. So it was, we'll see what happens today with Zelensky. I anticipate Trump, what I call the smoke machine, will be on, and they'll be blowing it up into his nether regions. And it'll probably be a very cordial, oh, we're with you. We support you. We're with you to the end, except you're going to have to pay for everything going forward, number one. Number two, no more free dough from us. So you get that from the Europeans. We fully back the Europeans supporting you with everything. Zelensky's got no cards to play. Now, what was interesting also in the meeting is that J.D. Vance brought up the point about, hey, you guys don't have free speech. And, what I said at the Munich Security Conference applies to you too. And Starmer, oh, we've got a long tradition of free speech. Oh, that's nonsense. That probably actually, that became apparent right after World War II when the Suez Crisis, when the Brits and French got together with the Israelis and tried to take the Suez Canal. And President Eisenhower basically bitch slapped them and said, you get back in your corner. And they had to get back in the corner. He has not adjusted to the fact that Great Britain ain't great no longer. Just Britain. They are no longer a relevant player on the world stage. From the standpoint of the United States, if we disrupted trade with the UK, the average American wouldn't even notice. Because our top three trading partners are, we're talking like $760 billion with the Chinese and the Mexicans and the Canadians. They're all up in triple digits. And Great Britain, the total is like 180 billion. It's a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to the over like the $3 trillion of trade, almost, or $2.6 trillion in trade that the United States does with Canada, Mexico, and China. That was when the world would finally clear that Britain was just a support. They were a support actor. It'd be like it would be like having. They once were the lead actor. They were the star. They were the Sean Connery or the Tom Cruise. Now they're the support actor. They're Hopalong Cassidy. There's somebody that shows up to support the main character, but they aren't the main character. And they aren't the main character militarily or economically. Britain's no longer relevant. That's the uncomfortable